Welcome to my coding school. In today's video, we are going to look at a new way of how to write code. So before we go to that, you can help us support the mission of delivering free and quality coding tutorials for everyone. You can use the options available. For example, you can help us with the internet to keep doing more research, and then the tools which we use, for example, the software that we use to record, to write the code. You can help us with the coffee to keep us energized, or you can simply buy us books that we use so that we are in a better position to deliver this content. You can support us via mobile money by using the numbers below. So that out of the way, let's get started. So here on my whiteboard, uh, I have some few notes that I've put up, and unlike other videos, this one we are not going to be writing code for now. We are going to first look at the foundations, the concepts that are behind the writing of code. So this is how I have named it, how to write code in 2026. And my idea is that you learn to create here, to create and design, and then build technology-based solutions. So let me get here this highlighter here. So let's start with this simple note on this side. So you probably know that anyone today can easily come up with code snippets. So that means that today it's very easy to write code. You can simply get an AI program, for example, ChatGPT or Cloud Sonnet or Copilot, and then you type in the code that you want, and it will generate for you that code. And most of the times it will be right. But then how useful the code on this one here, how useful the code is will depend on the person's capabilities. So AI will give you the code, but the output that it will give you will be as good as what you are giving it. So that means that you must be knowing what you are building. So here, this is how I started to learn how to code some few years ago. There wasn't much, there was no AI. All we had was Stack Overflow and then the articles on the internet and so on. So it started with an idea. You get an idea, and then you say, maybe I want to build coding school, or for that case. But back then, we used to first search some of the top richest men in the world, and then we found the Bill Gates, and then the so on, and then we identified the areas in which they were, and then we found that they were in technology. So that's how we began to get interested in technology. Uh, we didn't have good internet, not very many years ago, just maybe 5 years ago. Most of the agentic AI tools started booming around 2021. So AI can give you code, but is that code meaningful? So with that, let's get to the hint. So whenever you try to build something, you probably start with an idea, some keyword. For example, when I was learning to code, the first keywords that I got was coding and programming. And then for beginners, we all know that you start from somewhere. So in the old days, we started with those keywords, programming, apps, and then software. So the path that you take depends on how much you dive deep into those keywords. So from these simple words, we got knowledge, and then we built around that knowledge. For example, for me, when I searched, I first got into Java, but couldn't do much with Java. And then I went to Python. Just as you know, when you are not sure of what to do, you keep on navigating and trying out different options. And then until when I got to web applications. And with web applications, there is no way you can talk about such application without talking about the website. So we are on this screen note here. So now, after doing a little bit of more reading here and there, you get to what we call a website. And then you learn after some time that websites they are built using some technologies here, HTML, and then CSS, and then JavaScript. And then after learning that, you discover that a website is a collection of web pages. And then when you get those web pages, and then you link them together, you get a website. And then you start identifying that you use HTML to create web pages. And those web pages have elements like buttons, text, forms, and so on. But then you also find out that they will talk about CSS, which is a language that you use to design, like, for example, to add color, spacing, and then how to arrange items on a page. So you start now getting a glimpse of what a website is uh, from uh, from the inside. So now we're on this purple note here. So again, what is the idea behind the website? So why the interest? I mean, the thing that brings you into programming is what will determine what kind of path you will take. For example, if you're more interested in AI, you'd probably start by searching out about AI, and maybe you'll get to a language called Python. Then you get to the libraries, then you get to the tools, and then so on. But here, uh, the idea that we started with was of website, and we want to do business, because that's what I had in mind, was to do business. And to do business, I needed a website to do that. But even I just had the idea of a business. I don't even remember what business I was going to do. But then I started now learning these languages. So the key resource that I used was W3 schools. That's where I first got the HTML, and then the CSS. And then I learned, of course, I didn't learn it in order, because from time to time, you would jump from this to this, you go and read some business books, and then, because you remember you are copying, you have searched on the internet, found out the richest people, you find out what they know, what they read about, and then you end up with a lot of resources to read. So you keep on reading them in parts. So that's why this whiteboard is the way it is, because I'm just putting up things the way I learned them. So I hope that along the way you pick in a few things so that you can refine it and come up with your own style. So at this point, let's say we want to start an online coding school, like the one that we are using right now. And then at this point, you find yourself taking a certain direction. For example, you could take web development or app development. And for my case, I took web development because that's what I had about most of the times. So now I'll quickly skip. Let's say that you have mastered HTML, and then you have mastered CSS. Remember, HTML has variants. For example, XML, you have HTML5 and so on. And then you have CSS 2, 3, and then you also come up with libraries like uh, W3 CSS, Bootstrap, and then you get acquainted with the ecosystem around these languages, and then you finally arrive to JavaScript, because this tutorial I want to direct it to JavaScript. So now after that you have learned a few things, you will later find out that when you get web pages and then you link them together, they form a website, and that's the definition of the website. And then CSS has packages written by companies and other people which you can use to design your website without having to start from scratch. So here, uh, along the way, companies tend to develop uh, the tools that they want to use for their products. So those are some of the things that we normally incorporate into our projects, because they are already written, tested, probably better financed. So we find ourselves, instead of having to do those things from scratch, we just pick up those building blocks, and then we put them into what we want to do. So now let's get to JavaScript. So JavaScript is a programming language which is used to program the behavior or to interact with the web pages. So HTML is simply like the structure of the body, uh, the skeleton, and then CSS is probably like the body, the way a website looks like, and then JavaScript will be like the brain that will control that body. So now here we are on this note here. What have you learned so far on JavaScript? So here I've picked up a few things. I have values here, and then variables, and then these are used to store data. So here, what I'm trying to do is to throw in some of the key topics of JavaScript that I learned along the way, and then with this, we shall have a foundation, and then we have this foundation, we shall be able to have a version of a project or a website or an application or something that you want to build. And when you have this foundation, this understanding of JavaScript, you could easily start generating the code. So now, again, the kind of path that I'm following is that of we first get the knowledge. The knowledge is information, and then after that, after you get the knowledge, you can interact with it, and that's the part of understanding. You get insight, you comprehend it, and then after that, you can start working with that which is called the wisdom of it. So here, I'm just now starting to bring in some knowledge. So when you have a value, for example, 1, 2, 3, those are numbers. But those numbers, they're stored somewhere in the computer. And that place where they're stored in the computer, it has to have a name so that you can refer to those values later on. And then that's what we call variables. So we also have operators. Uh, Operators are the normal ones, you know. For example, adding numbers, subtracting, the mathematics. And then we have more custom operators that are not necessarily symbols, but they also manipulate data. And then we get to strings. So in computing, a string simply means a text. For example, if I'm creating the word MI coding school, it would be text, and then arrays. Arrays, this is a container. Take it as a container where we store values that are related. For example, if you have a basket of fruits, you could group them together, or a basket of cups, or something of that sort. You simply get data that is related, that is the same category, although it is unique, and then you put it together. For example, you can get the customers of a business, and then you put them to that container. And then you could do things with that container. For example, you could find them, could sort their names, and so on. So you will notice that if you just put in arrays in JavaScript in an AI program, and they will give you different examples. And then you will see that the reason why I'm not doing it here is because it's easy to generate code, but the hard thing is get the code that is useful. So far, good. So let's get to know website and see if we can do something. I had forgotten here, we have numbers, talked about them. For example, you can say price 2400. So this is a number. So now I hope that you have captured those and you're going to search about them and read about them so that you can build a foundation, and then you don't have to need to worry about a part of writing code, because AI can generate code more faster than you could. And I've just remembered that back then when we first used VS Code, we used to have extensions that could do intelligence. For example, if you're writing a function, you couldn't write the first two letters, and then it will predict what you are going to write, and then you press tab, and then it gives you the full function, so that you could edit a few parts. But only that worked when you knew what you were doing. So now we can say it looks like we can say that our website has data. So now remember, we are building a coding school, and then we have started realizing that we can get our coding school and then divide it into portions. Remember, a computer does not understand the way we understand. So we have a language, and a language is supposed to give us a way of how we can communicate with that computer. So in order to communicate with the computer, we have to get the language and understand it, so that we can understand the way it is going to think about what we give it. And it's the same with AI. AI doesn't understand the language that you give it to it, but it translates it into something that it can understand. It has rules or instructions or principles it follows. So now we can say that a student has properties. For example, when you have a students in your school, you will need to know their first name, their last name, their age, the course that they are taking, their location or address, and so on. Now, in JavaScript, that is called an object. So you represent your data using an object. So an object has key and then key value pairs. The name of the property, for example, uh, name, and then the value, Noel Ismail. So that's describing me. So, but we have many students. Remember that this is a school, we have many students. So you remember an array, so we could put those students in an array, and then you remember each student will also be unique, so that will give us an array of objects. So we can store this array into a variable, which is simply a name to a location in a computer's memory. So a computer has a way it stores data, and then that's where we get it from. So at this point, we have now some few building blocks. So what we are doing here is we are establishing first what we want to build and complete it. Then after we have completed what we want to build, then we can actually start building it. So I hope I'm not confusing it, but that's how I'm thinking. So it's a strange whiteboard, but we shall get along as we move on. So can we do some tasks on this website? Remember that in a school, you probably want to do certain things. Maybe you want to group students together, maybe according to age, or maybe for this case, we want to be able to store these students in a database. So that's where functions come from. So a function is simply a block of code that will execute or that will run when it is invoked or called. So let's say I want to store students in a database. I simply write a function that does the task. So still, you can get this prompt and put it into an AI program, and then it will give you an output. And then you will notice that you will get the function name, you will get the parameters it takes, you will get its block or its body, and then the return statements, and then the other things that are related to functions. So again, I'm not following a specific order. I'm just giving you things the way they occur to me. So you just have to take some time and refine them, and you can look into the documentations of JavaScript at MDN, and then you can put them up together so that you get your own style or your own combination. So every programmer has their own style. So a function is reusable. So that's how we come up with packages and modules. So here I'm introducing again modules. These are simply files of code that are written by other people that you use in your code, but then packages, this a more standard version of the modules that you can get from the public package managers. For example, NPM, we shall get to those. So here I'm giving you a little bit of the background and where we are going. So I want to make some decisions on my website. Okay? So here I want only a certain group of students to view premium videos. Let's say that MI Coding School has a website, and we have free content, and also we have premium content. So free content, anyone can view it, but then premium content, maybe we want students to pay a certain amount of money to be able to access those videos. So that's where I can start making decisions. So in JavaScript, the way we make a decision is by using an if statement or some other kind of statements that are available. But the whole of this is called conditional statements. So JavaScript calls this kind of grammar conditional statements. So you should be able to do certain things based on a condition. For example, we have here a variable called as paid. If this person has paid and it's true, then we check if it's true. Then we want to give them some premium content. Otherwise, uh, we want to do something else. So now let's go to this note here. But I realized that I have to keep repeating certain things. So here, again, what I'm doing is as you are trying to build something, you keep on getting thoughts that you need to collect and put up together so that you can see what you are trying to do. So that's why I put in these keynotes and then these some descriptions. The way I understand things, it may not be the exact way that you hope them to you may hope to find them, but I said you can refine them, you can clean them up so that you get what will work for you. So when you want to repeat certain things, for example, you have very many students, but then you can't display them by writing code for each and every one. So what you are going to do is to get to loops. So a loop is simply some code that will run as long as the condition remains true. So this is much, but the only part that makes coding difficult was write code. But then that one is now the most easiest thing to do. The only now tough thing to do is write code that is useful. So I want to say that when you use AI to build the things that you do not understand, it will give you an output which will look exactly like the input you give it. So if you tell it maybe you create for me a school management system, so it will gather the things that it can, and then it will give you, remember, their predictions or something that they are random. So it will give you that so that you can start interacting with it. And then along the way, you will notice that the AI will do errors because it can't judge things the way you would judge them. For example, the architecture you want to use, the libraries, the packages, your standards of coding, it won't know that. So it will be giving you things based on predictions. And remember, these predictions are coming from large data sets. So what they do is they get documents, they get videos, they get articles, they get blogs, and everything on the internet. They clean it up and then they feed it into the AI, and then they will use different models to adjust that AI to that data. So most of those articles, they are not 100% correct. So AI could make certain mistakes. And then now, if you can't judge the code, you can't, for example, you have to know that this part of the code does this. It starts from here, it ends here. This is how it relates with other parts. This is how files are organized. So that the key foundations. For example, if I'm to build a house and then I lay down the foundation, that house, that that even though the foundation is covered, the house will still follow the way it is set up. So if the foundation has 5 rooms, the building will also come up having 5 different sections. So now this is the most important part of coding that we have to know. So this is how we should take an AI. You are writing code because this is now code. You're writing code, but you are writing it in a human readable language, in a language that you understand. And then this language that you understand is one version, but then AI will help you to convert it to the other version of the code, which you can't interact with. And remember, that's how things have been working out for the time being, because that's how we started with machine code. You could write zeros and ones, but it was not easier. So they had to develop assembly language. And then after assembly language, they had to develop something even more abstract. And then they come up with low-level languages, the C and other. And then we had to come up with again more high-level languages until we got to JavaScript, which is an interpreted language. And then after JavaScript, now we have a different kind of, of instructing the machine. So that's how it is moving. So again, I want to remind you that I'm not following an order that is, in its sense, strictly sequential, not from A to Z, but still I try to make it logical. So as I told you that when you are doing certain things, you're always gathering things here and there. So at some time you can gather up a topic that we're not going to use now, and then you gather some topics that you would have to use at the start, and then you gather them later. So you simply have to keep on developing yourself so that you can refine them. So all I can say is you will come up with a different combination. So this is not, there are very many people whose resources I watched on YouTube, on articles and books, but this is not how they presented their own code. But as I fed on their content, I kind of developed this kind of setup, and so far I can use it very well. And this is how now I write people's projects, and that's how I'm able to deliver them faster. So later on, I will show you how we can use AI better. So now there's no way of avoiding hard work. So all of the things that I've mentioned so far, the topics, you have to go to the documentation. You have to put in some effort to look for these things, to learn them. And this video could maybe take an hour for me to mention these things, but it doesn't necessarily take an hour to learn them. You can take 30 days learning, trying to learn the things that are contained in the content of 1 hour. So the approach will change, but principles don't change. Principles are simply rules. They don't change. They remain the same. So that's how we used to learn coding. We learned it the hard way. But now, because AI is available, it doesn't mean that now you will learn it in in a simple way. It is better, but not necessarily simple. So it will depend on how much effort you put in. So this is how I want you to view AI. AI is a tool that translates your version, the natural language that you write, into another version, which is the code. So I know that people enjoy seeing the AI generate code, and they are impressed. But your ability to understand that code will determine how you use it. So if the prompt is bad, most of the times the output will be even worse. So there's no way you can generate some concrete idea from something that is shallow. So now for this video, we are going to stop up here, and then we are going to catch up later with the other things in a tutorial named JavaScript 2. So that's it. I'll see you in the very next one.